Ask questions. Because whether you're trying to become an intentional learner and or you're trying to raise an intentional learner, your child that way, or again, working with a student or whatever the case may be, I think asking questions is huge because it models curiosity.
Right.
But it also gets you to get information you couldn't get other ways. So I love questions because it gets me information, but also starts them thinking in terms of questions. Hi, I'm Amber.
And I'm Elayna. We're glad you're here to join us where
everything is learning. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
I was going to ask you the same thing. That's pretty funny. It's going pretty good.
Well.
So I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation.
Right.
And especially thinking that conversation I had with a friend of mine I was kind of telling you about. And when she asked me about like preparing her kid for kindergarten and all that kind of stuff. And I thought I was pretty slick with my answer of curiosity. Like I was pretty proud of myself.
I was slick.
I thought I was pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty wise. And then, I thought about it some more and came up with, I think, maybe an even better answer. Well,
love.
Not even an answer. It's actually like a shift in the question, if I'm being honest with you, which makes sense because that's basically what we're doing here, right? So we're trying to shift all the things.
Mindsets.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that the biggest thing, I wish I had changed her question. And like, instead of the focus being on preparing your child for school, because again, learning can and usually does happen in a school, but that's not the only place we're learning. And let's be honest, when we're at school, we're not only learning the academic content, right? Like everything is learning. So I think I wished that I had changed her question from that. Like instead of preparing a kid for school, that sounds terrible. So preparing your child for school, kid. I think it's more of what can I do to prepare them for life, right?
Right.
And if I am looking at it from that perspective, and even if I'm looking at it for the lens of school, fine, whatever. I think it's that we really need to focus on raising kids to be intentional learners.
Right.
Like we've talked before about, look, everything is learning. We are learners constantly, whether we're aware of it or not. Everything is learning. Learning is always happening, for better or for worse, but learning is always happening, right? I think that's the shift, that we need to become intentional learners.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. So I guess for people who don't know what we mean by that, how would you define that?
So that's a great question. Let's go back. I think defining learning as information coming in, you're processing it somehow, right? Storing it, using it later. Cool. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff that's always happening. Intentional learning is that we kind of are seeking out information, or at least open to the fact that we're always receiving information. Sometimes it's like a constant seeking, like an active seeking out, right? Hey, I want to know more about this. Other times it's like you're kind of going through life and like, oh, wait a second. That's interesting. I'm curious about that now. So kind of being aware that like stuff's happening all around, be curious. So seeking it out and then consciously processing it, which to me means you have to know how you process, how your brain works, how can you store it in there strategically.
Right.
Like what, every brain is different. Like we've talked about before. That's my favorite topic to talk about, is how we're all different. Yeah. And then how can you use your strengths, because we're all different, how you use your strengths effectively, and how do you store that? How do you build on that information now that you've put in, processed, stored, build on that, and then use that to kind of propel yourself forward in some way. Right. So that to me would be intentional learning. It's kind of taking the same 4 steps of regular learning, but cranking them up to 11. Oh my God. I don't know where that came from. That was so bad. Oh Lord. It. Okay. Anyway. I'm like embarrassed for myself right now.
No, please don't be. I loved it. I only wish people could see the way that you just did that. It just made me
That's why I'm glad we don't video these. It's probably better for everybody, let's be honest. But,
No, I
like,
love it.
it's, again, just putting intention with it, right? Like, just kinda at
I
each of these steps, know how learning happens,
Right.
and then putting intention behind it, at each of those steps, and kinda
Yeah, I
just
think that's exactly it. So you figure out
right.
what learning is to you,
Yeah.
how you learn.
Yeah.
And then once you understand those 3 things, that's when you can be intentional. The word
And
intent is in
unstoppable, let's
intentional learning. Right.
exactly,
Oh,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then all you do after that is you personalize, fine tune, etc. But
Right, exactly.
I I do think that that really is the easiest way to think about it is
Mhm.
intentional learning means intent. And
Right.
I do believe it's a sense of focus of a journey or discovery that's deliberate or on
Right.
purpose.
Right.
And I do
Right.
also firmly believe that intentional learning is also open-ended.
Oh,
And
1,000%. Probably more so than conventional learning if you think about it.
oh,
Like,
absolutely.
there's
And
actually a
there
lot more
really are.
freedom and, like, excitement within intentional learning, I think.
Right, I agree. I do think that there are a lot of emotions attached, positive emotions attached, which led me down this idea actually that
Mm,
there are 2 types of intentional learning. There's probably more, but the first
okay.
2 that came to my head are healthy and unhealthy. And I do think the
Ooh.
reason that we had jobs is because there are a lot of people out there who are intentionally trying to learn but in an unhealthy way, and our job
Yes.
was to like put it in focus for them.
Yes.
I think it
And
was part of our job. Obviously it was not fully
but
encompassing, but
I mean, that's totally it. Like, I was thinking a lot about this, kind of thinking about intentional learning and learning as a whole. One of the biggest challenges I see is when we equate learning with education.
mhm,
Oftentimes, we're far more student, parent, both, I don't know, whoever, far more concerned about a grade
right.
than progress, growth, understanding, those kind of things. Progress, growth, and understanding are signs of intentional learning.
Oh, absolutely.
Grades are a marker of maybe some kind of learning that happened in a very specific way and was assessed in a very specific way,
Right.
right? But, like, if I'm intentional with my learning, then I the importance is more on what do I know and what can I do with this.
Right. Yes, 100%. I really believe if you are intentionally learning something because you're told or you're
Yeah,
forced to, I
dude.
believe it kills curiosity and learning.
100%. You know what? I have a bookshelf to the left of me filled with books, a lot of them classics, right? Because as an educator, that's what you're supposed to do. No, I'm totally kidding. That's not true. But what's funny that you say that is when I was a student, I had to read all these books. Ask me
Oh,
if I
yeah.
read them as a student.
No, of course you didn't.
Listen, I
Well,
started.
if you did, I
Okay,
was
I
gonna say you like
started them.
surfed. Yeah, yeah.
I
Or you
started
started,
them.
or you spark notes them. So you're read-ish.
I actually never spark notes because growing up, it was Cliff's
No?
Notes growing up, and they were books that you had to buy. And your girl ain't
Oh,
had a
okay.
budget for that. We didn't have free online resources back at that point, right? So I made up my own Cliff's Notes. I really just listened in class discussions and kind of picked up the vibes and kind of put pieces together, honestly. But
Right.
as an adult, oh, and that was because I was told to read them,
Oh, sure.
right? And because,
So
like,
there's
who wants to
pressure
read a
to
book
do
when you're
that.
told to read them? Like, not
Never. Don't
me.
do that.
I don't want to do anything I'm told to
Please
do.
don't make people do that.
Oh my gosh. But but they are good books, right? So I did go back and, like, as an adult, I went back to read them. I
Yeah.
intentionally, and I'm getting more out of them as adults. Even, like, working with kids. Listen, Fahrenheit 451.
Oh my gosh, don't even get me started. I
I
love
read it
that
in
book, and I
school.
hated it when I was in school.
Hated it.
Hate
Well,
it.
it was kind of weird. Or I also 1983, right?
Okay.
Same kind of a vibe as, like,
Yes, yes, yes.
right? Like, I had to read that one. I was like, this is so dumb. What is this? Now reading them, I'm like, Fahrenheit 451. How did Ray Bradbury know? How did he
I
know?
know. We
How
talk
did he
about this
know that
all
we're
the
gonna
time.
have these
Shells in my ears.
earbuds?
I cannot.
100%,
I can't do it
right?
with the shells in the ears
Right.
reference. It kills me.
Now,
Ray
I may
Bradbury.
have made some of these connections when I was younger, but as an adult, like, it's a whole different thing when I want to do it. when I
Right.
want to read it, when I want to understand more, when I want to explore that way. And let's be honest, I'm not doing it for a grade. I'm
Yeah,
not
that's
doing
true.
it under a time constraint. This is
Oh, yeah.
something that I'm like, I have my time to explore. I can have time to be curious. I can, whatever I want to do, I can look. It's just a whole different mindset when you're going through it intentionally.
Right.
I,
In a healthy way.
right. Exactly. Exactly. Because even I've told you before, like last week, we talked about how I would go through school and school was easy for me. The act of school was easy for me.
Mhm.
So I didn't really try very hard. And my goal wasn't to get good grades. I mean, it was to get fine grades, but I wasn't like, I need an A in every single thing. I need 100. That wasn't my mindset. So I wasn't unhealthy in that way, but I was unhealthy in a different way. I just wanted to get it, like skate by, get it done, not work too
Right.
hard, still meet the expectation. And there's information I missed that I kind of like,
Right.
now I'm like, oh, I kind of wish I had paid attention. I would have known that and had more to contribute at this dinner party. No, I'm kidding. Um, how often does information from school come up at your dinner parties? And you're like, how often do you go to dinner parties? Who am I? What am I saying?
I don't know. Oh, I
As I
love it
sit
though.
here, like in my perma hoodie, acting like I'm fancy and have dinner parties.
We're gonna
Listen,
have to
the
talk
biggest dinner
off.
party I have is like we ordered for 4 people at McDonald's, and it was still just the two of us. Like that's the biggest dinner party I've ever had.
But y'all have enough conversation that it could be 6 people.
Oh, that's
Like, it could
true.
be
That's
Clue
true.
in your house between the 2 of you.
That's true.
I love it, though.
It's
That's
either
a
we're talking nonstop about random things or we're not talking. Not in a bad way. It's just like we're both just enjoying the quiet or whatever. It's funny.
just I really love that because,
Oh god, that book.
yeah, I just honestly, it actually, like, creeps me out to my core.
Because we're
And
getting
when I was
closer and closer to the actual things.
I know, it's wild, and I really don't love that. Um,
No, that's why I think this stuff is so important.
right. It really is.
If we can raise more intentional learners and kind of if we can all shift and become intentional learners, then something like that wouldn't happen. Because that was the
Oh,
problem, right? They didn't
100%.
value learning.
I do think telling learners of any age that
Mm,
particular example is always really helpful.
right.
I was trying to think of something that I could share when I was going through my own process of intentional learning, when I didn't know that I was defining it in my own life.
Oh yeah.
And I had this really cool experience. Um, so I played sports my whole life growing up. I
Yeah.
had to be a straight A student. I had to be like the best of the best. And I'm talking like at 7 and 8 years old in Little League, my unhealthy, intentional way of learning
Yeah.
was my end goal, didn't care, was to be the Babe Ruth of my Little League.
Oh
Like
wow.
totally something just like I was like, I don't care how I
If
get
I'm
there.
gonna do it, I
That's
gotta
my
be
end
number
goal.
one.
Right. And that was
Got
the
it.
only mindset. I was like, I
Yeah.
don't care how I get there. I don't care what I do. I'm going to do that.
Right.
And when I got to high school and I learned from a different coach that it's a lot about teamwork and how you move
Mm,
and how you think and how you can anticipate. And I was always really good at those things athletically, but because I was doing it in a unhealthy way and just thinking about me and how I could be
right.
the best as opposed
Right.
to thinking about us and how we could be the best,
Right.
I lost a lot of things along the way. And now that
Ah,
I
yeah.
have coached other young people and learners, I found myself teaching people about the journey and about learning new
Yes.
sets of skills, learning new ways to communicate
Yes.
to each other, learning new ways to take in
Yes.
information and apply it off the field. And that completely different approach also indirectly engaged more of my players and made them
Right.
more curious
Yes.
and made them want to grow personally.
Right.
They still were engaged and wanted to try.
Because that's the thing, right? Like some of us have natural talents and gifts, right? To where you step up to
Sure.
the plate and it's easy for you, no problem.
Right.
And sometimes it honestly makes it harder to be an intentional learner when you have a natural ability for something, I think,
Oh, 100%.
right? Because
What
you're
an
like, oh, I don't
insight.
have to learn. I'm good. I got this. And that's
Right.
also where we run into that issue. Well, if I have it right away, I'm smart, I'm good, it cool. If I don't have it right away, it's just not going to happen for me. That's just how the cards are. That's just what I
Right.
was dealt, right?
And
But I
curiosity is
love
gone.
right, right. I love what you said about the focus is on the journey. Because I mean,
Mhm.
we've talked before about like we've said journey, we've said wandering so many times in these conversations, but like that really is it. It's the beauty of like the road trip. The focus is on the journey, not the destination.
Right.
And with the unhealthy intentional learning, your intention is just misplaced, I feel like, right? Like
Yes.
you're intentional, but it's maybe not in the healthiest of places where maybe you're focused so
Right.
much on the end result. And I would
Yes.
also say maybe you're focused on the end result as defined by somebody else. I've said this
Right.
before, and I'm going to talk about this till the day I'm dead, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But it is so important to define so many things for yourself.
Right.
And I think that, like, in raising intentional learners, I would say at first when I started thinking about intentional learners, I was like, well, we can raise intentional learners and then we can be intentional learners ourselves. And maybe those are two different processes. I don't think they are. Either way, you're raising an intentional learner, whether it's you or somebody else, right? Your child or whatever case may be, a student you're working with, whatever.
Mhm.
I think the very first step is just that shift in perspective and priorities. So first shifting to
Right.
becoming an intentional learner, right? Like, okay, hang on. What do I actually care about? What is important here? Um, I think that's the first step is kind of taking that shift. If everything is learning, we don't have to use the standards of society or the standards of a school system or the standards of the person standing next to you, right? Like if everything is learning, we're learning all the time. We can
Right.
create some of these standards for ourselves and change the definitions of words. What is success? Like I don't
Right.
think success is straight A's.
No, I don't either.
I don't think
Metacognitive.
success is getting into college.
Right.
I don't think success is getting into a. I mean, at different parts of your journey, those might be things that would kind of like they might be. That's just not the ultimate success to me. I also don't think the
Right.
ultimate success is being a millionaire. Like, I don't, those are not the priorities for me that I think we should be focusing on. I think, it's like you said, it's the journey and
Right.
shaping that the path along the way.
Right.
I love
I
that.
do think a lot of this that's all coming up too is I see these images in my head of when healthy intentional learning happens
Mm,
with ease,
mm,
where sometimes we're being intentional about a goal,
mm-hmm.
but it's practical, right? So
Okay.
you and I have worked in faith-based schools, religious schools,
Yeah.
and I was thinking about, especially during the holidays, how I know in my high school we organized gift drives for the holidays for the less fortunate.
Nice. Yeah.
It's a huge thing. They still do it. It's called Golden Mass. We all get
Love that.
together. We would even alumni would pray
Oh,
over
that's
the
cool.
gifts, and then for an entire day you go out and you deliver these gifts to
Oh,
people.
that's cool.
But we were responsible for raising the money. We were responsible for calling other adults to see if they would donate. We were also responsible for taking care of this family. So we would
Mm.
call like local grocery stores to make sure that they had the food.
Oh,
So they
wow.
had
Yeah.
dinner. And like, we're doing all of these things. We're doing math. We're
Mm-hmm.
doing what
Mm-hmm.
could be considered like education,
A hundred
but we
percent.
were learning and it was real life practical learning. Or
Right.
one of my favorite traditions was making sufganiyot, when we would go
Uh,
in and we would learn how to make sufganiyot.
Give me a
And
jelly filled donut every day.
every day.
Every day.
But
Oh, I
doing
want one
that,
now,
going into a
actually.
kitchen, like working with other people, trying to figure out how to make the perfect one and how to make it taste so good and how to make it not too greasy, and
Right.
you're talking and you're vibing and you're learning from each other, and it's in a non-stressful environment. You're
Yeah.
doing like 52 steps,
Yep.
and it's a multi-step equation, it's a
Yep.
multi-step faceted experience. Or going to museums, I used to love going to museums. I mean, I can't wait to take my kids to museums. Going to museums, it invites questioning and curiosity immediately. Like,
It
Always.
can. It can.
Well, that's true.
If
If
you're
you're
intentional about
curious.
it and if you're open
Yes,
to it and if
intentional.
you're modeling all that stuff, like,
Right.
yes, it can and it should. I hear you.
Right. Or
But
or
that's
for
kind of a side
instance,
effect of you being an intentional learner, right? I think
I
that's a
love
piece
that
of
you
it.
said side effect. It is because modeling, when you talk
Yes.
about practical ways to raise intentional learners, modeling is,
Being one
especially when
yourself.
your learner is so young, it's
Yes.
so healthy and so
Yes.
important.
I
So
think
important.
it's funny because we've talked before about many iterations of businesses we want to start or projects we want to undertake or all those kind of things.
Right.
And, along the way, we just kept talking about, um, hang on, I was so building up for this that my brain just totally shut off. And give me 1 second, it's going to come back.
Go for it.
You were just talking about, hang on, walk me back, walk me back. What were you
Yeah,
saying?
raising intentional learners and how practical learning is important and how modeling is important and it's a side effect to
Yes.
being an intentional learner, and that's how you can raise an intentional learner.
Growth and progress. Got it. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank
go.
you very much. That helped me so much to
Yes.
walk back there. Um, this is why I really appreciate you too, is because like that happens to me a lot where my brain will just stop working. And but I always appreciate you just taking the time to walk back with me and then we get back on the same train and we're ready to go. So that's awesome.
Oh my god,
That
absolutely.
was beautiful modeling that for people listening, by the way. Um, okay. So, in all these different versions, we were talking about how I was saying how, like, we've talked about many businesses and things we want to start and all this kind of stuff. And
Sure.
it everyone, we use the words learning and progress and growth so much.
We do.
And I think to the point where we both were like, can we use a sentence without any one of these three words? Can we write a sentence without any one of these three words?
It made
We
us
couldn't.
physically ill.
Right.
We were
But
like,
I think that's kind of the thing, though, right? Is the fact that, like, I think true learning, especially intentional learning,
right,
the result is growth. The result is progress. Because I'm
right,
going to define that on my own, right? Like the goal isn't a very specific thing necessarily. The goal is, do I know more than I did yesterday? Am I better than I was yesterday? Right? Can I
right,
do more than I could do yesterday? That's the goal. And
right,
if we're putting certain time restraints on things, then, or other restraints, or whatever the case may be, we're missing that intentional learning. We're missing the learning actually,
right,
because there's not really any growth or progress. So, like, and because we're all different, that growth and progress is going to be different. But at the end of the day, it's all about the journey and the growth and progress of it and putting those together. Because to become curious, you get more curious over time, right? Kind of like
right,
the more questions you ask, the more questions you're going to ask. The more
right.
you
Oh,
learn, the more you
absolutely.
realize there's more to learn, that kind of a
I
thing.
I know.
Um,
I couldn't
yeah,
agree with you more about that because I really believe it's a lot about providing opportunity.
100%.
And it's explaining and giving like metacognitive prompts so that you're
Yes.
thinking about your thinking, you're
Yeah.
thinking about how you're feeling, you're thinking about how you're learning.
Yep.
And I think a lot of intentional learning, healthy intentional learning in particular, when you reach that point consistently and it's
Yeah.
thriving and it's a living innate thing for you on your own, it really is down to having a positive mindset and a healthy and positive outlook on
Right.
intentional learning
Right.
and where you want to
And,
go with it.
and they, like, that's another thing that kind of begets itself, right? Like, the more I have a positive mindset about learning and looking at it more openly, the more positive I'm going to feel about my learning and about my progress, or about my
Right.
kids learning, my child's learning, my child's progress. Like, just like if you wake up grumpy and bad things, and you only see the bad things, you're going to get more grumpy as the day goes on, right? But if you have that, if you're looking for good, you're going to find good.
Right.
So if you have
It
a
it
positive
truly
mindset, you're going
is.
to have positive mindset.
Waking up and doing I used to think during the pandemic, waking up and doing a gratitude journal was just
Mm,
like something that was really forced. And I think it's initially, I think it comes down to habits too, I do think. And
yeah, yeah.
I don't remember how many days exactly it
21,
takes.
they say. Well, at
It's
least that used to be the
21,
word. That used to be
the
what they said.
21-day journey. Yeah.
They used to say it
It
takes 21 days to make something become a habit.
Okay. So
Is that
let's
what
go
you're
with
saying?
that.
I think.
Yeah, so
I
let's
haven't
go with that.
researched in a while,
So
but I think that's what they used to say.
if we have to do 21 days of the same thing, I'm telling you, by day 3 or day 4, this gratitude journal that I felt I was forced to do during the pandemic, I was like, all right, let's get up. Let's do this journal. Let's like,
Okay,
hey, let's
okay.
get it. Like
Right?
it's a new day. And it was
Right?
just so then I started doing it at night. And honestly, I gotta pick it back up. But
I know
it
you're
was
kind of
this,
inspiring me to do it too, actually.
yeah, no, it really does. Like your mindset really is, it really is everything.
Mhm.
And it's such a great learning experience to learn about your mindset too. And
Yeah.
to be very clear, I just talked about how I am not intentionally doing something that is good for me. But I want to get back there. And I do think that that's why this is really a journey of wandering, because you
But
have
that's the
these
thing.
moments where you're
Yes.
propelled to do like and feel
Yes.
these great things, but like life does really honestly get in the way sometimes. Sometimes you
Yes.
have a learning mentor who's not positive. Sometimes you have
Yes.
a bad experience at work. Sometimes you have
Or just
personal
bad things
loss.
happen. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a lot.
And
It can
but
be
like
a
you said,
lot.
the fact that so you just mentioned right now that you are kind of avoiding something you know is good for you, or like you haven't, whatever you just said, however you just said
Right.
that.
No, you're right.
That,
Yeah.
but even still, that doesn't make you a failure.
Right.
That
I
doesn't
don't
mean you
consider
have
myself a
failed
failure
in
for sure.
anything because the
Right.
journey's not over, right? Like you can
Yes.
only fail if you don't have a chance to do it again.
Right.
Because,
Right.
like I've said before, mistakes, they're not failures. That's a lesson,
Right.
right? So, like, okay, so you stepped off this habit and you're realizing that you need to do it again. Okay, so you do it again. Big whoop. Great. You've
Right.
moved forward. That's intentional, healthy learning, right? You kind of noticed what was going on
Right.
and made a change about it. Like, okay, great. That's 100% what you
Right.
should be doing. And you
Yeah.
made those connections. Like, that's another thing, too. I think making connections. You made that connection between doing that habit being positive for you and not doing that habit is negative for you. It's a
Right.
huge connection to make. And if you know
Yeah.
that, okay, then it helps you make the decision of what you want to do. And even making connections, going back to like kids, making those kind of connections, but also connecting what you've learned.
Right.
Oh, like we were watching, I love baking. We love the Great
Oh yeah.
British Bake Off over here,
Yes, we
right?
do.
And,
TV.
we know with baking, they laminate dough where it goes
Right.
dough, flour, or, I'm sorry, dough butter
Dough
to make
butter, yeah.
croissants or pie crust, whatever the case may be. Great.
Mhm.
Then we were watching something and he's like, oh, well, let me laminate this wood real quick so that I can start my sculpture. And my partner was like, wait, what does that mean? I was like, oh, it's like dough. I know what it means. And then, so like just making those kind of connections that happens
Right.
all the time. And you
It
can
does.
build on your knowledge so easily. And I think helping kids do that, essential.
Oh,
Pointing out the
absolutely.
connections between things and how everything happens, patterns, cycles, all that kind of stuff. Just that. And asking
Right.
questions, like you said too. Love that.
I do think that we've talked a bit about how we can practically become intentional learners,
Hmm.
but if you had to make, let's call it like a 3 bullet pointed list,
Yeah.
what do you think, and it doesn't, these don't have to be the perfect 3, but just the
Okay.
top 3 that come to your mind immediately, like right now. So,
Yeah.
how can we become, how can we practically become intentional learners?
That's a really good question. Three things. Um, first thing I would say is embrace the journey.
Mm,
So that philosophy shift, mindset shift, all that has to happen before anything else.
right.
So embrace the journey. Two, ask questions. Because
Mm,
whether you're trying to become an intentional learner and or you're trying to raise an intentional learner, your child that way, or again, working with a student or whatever the case may be, I think asking questions is huge because
right.
it models curiosity,
Right.
but it also gets you to get information you couldn't get other ways, right? Like I can observe somebody at this point and I just by observing them, I can know a lot about how they operate, how their brain works, how they learn, how they feel about themselves as a learner. I can get all of that just by watching somebody for the most part.
Right.
But there are things I won't get, right? There are things that happen internally that we have no sign of outside.
Right.
And which is one of the things with like behavior that always threw me off because there was like not as much focus on the inside part and just on
Right.
behavior. And I was like, yes, and hang on. Um, so I love questions because it gets me information, but also starts them thinking in terms of questions.
Right.
So I love questions. And then the last thing I would say is playing games.
Oh, you love
I love
games.
games. I
You
love
love
games.
games.
I love, and yeah, people, I actually don't mind video games. Certain ones, like, okay, fine, maybe put a limit on, but I think there's so much learning that happens in video games that
Right.
I'm just going to leave that there. They're not all negative. Card games, board
Agreed.
games, love that. For in terms of like creativity and thinking, I love games like I Spy, 20
Yes.
questions. Um, we play this game with one of my nephews. Well, actually, a lot of my nephews. My sister, I don't know if she came up with it or just taught it to us, but we call it I'm thinking of an animal. And
Aw.
basically, it's like, okay, I have an animal. I'm thinking of an animal. You have to try to guess it by asking me questions. It's kind of like 20 questions, but it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be 20. It doesn't have to be yes or no, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, Anything like those kind of opportunities, just to where you're thinking and putting pieces together and play. Yeah, I just think play is the best place to learn.
Oh, I love
Best
that.
place to
That
learn
really is play.
for
I
all
love
of
that.
us, and not just kids.
No, not at all.
No.
I really think one of the best jobs I ever had, um, I think was going outside of work
Mm,
and spending time together and doing we did axe throwing at one point.
so fun.
We did paintball. That was so much fun.
Nice.
Um, and it was just so different from the day-to-day work, but we also got to see people in a different environment,
Yes.
which was really nice. It really
Yeah.
was wonderful. It was a great way to build community too.
Yeah.
But it was also something we all like agreed upon going to and all of
Like
that. So I think
coworkers, you
that's
said
really
that was a thing.
yeah, coworkers, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
I
great. I
think
think that
it's kind
bonding
of
is really
interesting.
important.
I, as you were saying that, I just started thinking about how like because you mentioned seeing each other in like a different context, different environment, that kind of a thing.
Right.
And I started to wonder if we are all living intentionally, would that happen where we would see each other in a different context? Or would we be intentionally seeing each other just as like whole present people if the
You know what's
focus is
interesting?
different?
It's interesting that you say that because one of my life goals is to be the same person everywhere I am consistently,
Mm,
so no one has to wonder.
right.
And I feel like I am so much more there than I've ever been before.
That's amazing.
And thank you for saying that because it's not easy because
No, we're so
it
used
in
to masking or being
we
different people in
have
different because they're supposed to.
yeah, we're
Right.
supposed to. But the thing that I learned from other learners who were much younger than me
Mm-hmm.
is they taught me how important it is for me to be human.
Mm.
And while I do think that being an
Mm.
intentional learner has a lot to do with modeling. I really
Oh my
do.
God,
I think it
yes.
has to do with modeling. I think it has to do with curiosity and questioning. But I also
100%.
really believe in community and mindset and
Yeah.
fostering that.
Yes.
And by community, you and I have talked about it before, but community can be another person of one, like the two of us. We were
Right.
our own community or
Right.
our own community, or it
Right.
could be a community of 20,
Right.
40, 50,
Right.
100. Um, but I do
And
think
that's going to
that
look different
that's
for
very
everybody because
important.
we all have different needs, different personalities, all those different things. You say a group of
100%.
20, I instantly start breathing heavy. Oh my God, 20 people?
Yes.
I don't even know 20 people. Oh my God. What? And because, for me, it's not always easy to be vulnerable and to be authentic in a group of 20 people.
Right.
Right. So that's not always my best learning environment. That's why I also picked a small college, for example, because that's just who I am
Right.
as a learner. I know that about
I
myself.
did too.
And it's also important who I pick to be in my community.
Right.
And I want people of a similar mindset in that I want people who are on a journey.
Right.
I want people within that community to be as different from me as possible because I want to see different journeys. I don't want to be in a community of people whose journeys look the exact same as mine because I don't believe in that. Like we
Right.
all are different and we all have a different path. And I want to learn from you because you might say, here's how I approach this situation. And I can glean from that. But if you do the exact same thing as me, that doesn't really spur me to change or grow or like that kind of a thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think by living in community with people who are different from you, it allows you to be curious,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of ask questions of yourself, of them, and then kind of maybe make some changes for yourself based on it. Not that they're right and you're wrong, not that, right? Again, is there a right and wrong? I don't know. I think there's a right for you and a wrong from you, right? In different
Right.
things when it comes to learning anyway. Yeah, so I think community is important, but the right community is probably more is really important too.
Is the most important.
Thank
Correct.
you, the
Yeah.
most important. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It really is. No, you're 100% right. I really believe that with all the constraints that society puts on us
Mm-hmm.
and restraints that
Mm-hmm.
society puts on us, and I'm not saying society is bad. I really, like, obviously, I live in this society and I choose to live
It
in the
is what it
United
is,
States.
right? And
Right.
like,
But I think that part of becoming a healthy, intentional learner is to talk about the bad too, and to talk about the challenges, and
right,
to create a safe space for people to be able to do that
right,
as learners, because you
right.
can't continue to learn and really learn practical strategies for life and coping
And
mechanisms
healthy
if you
intentional
don't.
learning strategies.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you aren't being open and honest. And I think that's what keeps me going on my
Mm,
healthy intentional learning journey.
yeah.
Um, is just that idea, because you're talking about 20 people being anxiety producing. For me, time is super
Ugh,
anxiety
time,
producing
time,
for
time,
me.
time. Yeah, I mean, I feel like time is one of the biggest opponents because if healthy intentional learning is about embracing the journey, I can't put a time limit on a journey,
Ooh,
right?
right.
Like I might have a time I'd like to get to my destination by, but I live in Atlanta and traffic is a real thing. And moronic drivers, another real thing.
Oh, so
And when
real.
their powers combine, your destination time, your arrival time is totally different. A whole different ballgame. I think, yeah, I would say that too. Like any of these societal expectations, I say any of them because I just at this point I don't think I fit into a lot of society's norms. And they
Right.
don't work for me. And the more I learn myself, the more I'm uncovering that. So at this point, I'm just like, let me just go hide out in a cave and make my own rules for everything because that's how I feel. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of societal norms and constraints, and time is the biggest one of them,
Right.
especially for healthy, intentional learning. You can't put a time limit on it. And I look
Right.
at like students I've worked with, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Mhm.
And oftentimes, not even often, every time, whatever I'm trying to teach that student or get them to learn, I know all of them are capable of learning whatever information it is I'm trying to give them. I know
Yes.
that. 1,000%
Right.
I know that. I know everybody's capable of learning. I know everybody is capable of change. That's not a question to me. The
Right.
challenge for these kids, though, they can learn it 100%, but they all need a different time limit, a time,
Right.
different amount of time to learn it. On top of different ways to present it, on top of
Right.
this, on top of that, on top of. But the time is the biggest one.
Yeah, one of the most basic ideas is one you just hit on.
Mm.
Everyone is capable of learning.
Yep.
It's just a true and ardent fact. And I think sometimes it's the most overlooked element of learning
Oh
and
my God. Yes.
traditional education for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a great
intention.
point.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, that's a great point.
right? Because I feel
Ugh.
like sometimes in learning, it's the things that are so easily overlooked that are the most important pieces.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I think we talk a lot about intentionality too.
Yeah.
And intentional learning is the holy grail, in my opinion, of beginning the journey of learning.
Yeah, I'm with you. For sure. And again, in any kind of, like, not even just a traditional learning environment, learning in any kind of way.
Right.
Dance class, new hobby, new job, new role as a parent, new role as a anything,
Adult.
you know,
Yeah.
right? Oh God. Ugh. Yeah.
I do think just before we reach it, we have to be aware that there's going to be bumps and challenges that still impact our abilities in learning.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I mean, I totally
yeah.
agree. Like, I think it's important that everyone knows and truly believes that we're all capable of change, continuous improvement. Like I said earlier, these are facts. This is not a question. This is like
Right.
the end, like you said too. And it's important to know how you think, how you work, how you take information in. It's important to know why like why you do the things that you do sometimes, right? Be honest with yourself about your strengths. But at the same time, we also have to be honest about challenges because they're a real thing.
Oh, yeah,
They're a
absolutely.
real thing. And learning to like find a way through them or to overcome them is just another aspect of learning.
Right.
Because learning's everything.
And everything is learning.
Don't tell anybody. Exactly.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, like, and we talk a lot about knowing your brain and being
Mm-hmm.
able to set
Mm-hmm.
goals, and you need to know that stuff first.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Learners of all ages can conceptualize how their brains work. And I'm
Yeah.
talking even,
Especially if that's an ongoing conversation and like even more so it's that way. But I think, yeah, I'm with you.
yeah, I mean, I'm having that conversation with my 2-year-olds.
Right.
Like,
Right.
oh, what are your feelings telling you? What is your brain
Right.
telling you? Like, if a 2-year-old can, and of course, I'm not talking about, they understand every single thing I'm saying, but just even
They're
giving
not
them
writing a
that
thesis paper
vocabulary,
about those thoughts and feelings either.
they
But
are
they're able
absolutely
to
not.
name them just like they can name colors.
Sure, exactly. And I think if a 2-year-old can do it, we should all be able to do it. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
100%.
And I'm not saying it's easy, but if one of my toddlers is working on building a structure and it falls, and they're
As
struggling
they
after
do.
it falls,
Especially if you have a twin sibling who knocks it over. But yes,
yeah.
carry on. I digress.
you know, and I've talked to you about this 100 times, so I know you know it. But it's understanding how they identify the challenges that impact their learning. So if it
Right.
falls, they go back and they try it again.
Right.
They might have a little bit of a tantrum, but
Right.
I can see that their brain is thinking, oh, I can go and reattempt a similar structure, but I'm
Right.
not going to make the same exact mistake again. Now, sometimes they do until they figure it out, but it's the same thing with a 13-year-old learner who goes to write a thesis statement for an essay and realizes that their outline has absolutely nothing to do with where they're going in their
Right.
paragraphs,
Oh
Or
man. Been there
like
as a student
16
and as a teacher with that student coming to you panicking. Yes.
Oh, I know. I was just working on it like today with a student. But, like, or if a 16-year-old working their first job is taking their time counting cash because someone didn't use their credit card this time.
Right. Right.
And decided not to do the personal checkout. And, instead of counting your index finger and your thumb, they take more time to like put a dollar bill down on the register
Right.
to make sure they've counted correctly.
Yep.
Or like even an executive who like finds it challenging to present during like global town hall meetings and says or like 100,000 times.
Right.
We all have challenges, but with strategies, with being able to sit down and reflect and think
Yes.
about it. And with practice, we're able to identify, we're able to reflect, and we can overcome all of those challenges that we're finding
Right.
to become more intentional.
Right. And those are just like personal challenges that we might have with like sometimes it's within the wiring of our brains, sometimes it's we haven't learned other avenues of dealing with something yet. You know what I mean? So
100%,
we got those personal ones, and then we also have just the plethora of challenges that are in traditional learning education settings. Time being one of them that we've talked about so many times, so many
Right.
instances before, right? Like, and then you've got parents on top of that having the challenge of trying to navigate their child's understanding of the curriculum and content, and also where's my role in this, how much do I help, do I understand how the new way that they're being this is being approached in the classroom.
Right.
Like, right. There are just so many possible challenges in learning.
Right.
And I think we all know that because we all have hit them at different points in our journeys as human beings, you know?
Absolutely.
I think that's definitely something, I'm with you, that we need to talk about next time. Just
Yeah.
the challenges that impact learning. At least start that conversation. I don't know if it's a one episoder, but
Yeah.
you know, we've seen so many challenges. We've experienced so many challenges on both sides of the desk, I guess you could say, in a traditional setting, just in life in general.
Right.
And knowing that the goal of talking about challenges, like the goal of identifying and speaking about them, is to name them, identify them, and then create a plan to overcome them, or put together the strategies and a plan to navigate through them. And like, but we have to talk about them first. We have to know what's there so we can address it for sure.
Yeah.
And then how do we move forward?
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about it next time for sure.
Sounds great.
All right.
See you then.
See you then.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Everything is Learning.
We'll catch you next time.